day, another episode of OneSoccer Today. My name is Adam Jenkins, and the gentlemen in the squares around me, I can assure you, their real-life personality is anything but square. It's Oliver Platt, it's Gareth Wheeler, and it's our friend and the man who's basically solely responsible for my subscription to The Athletic and Pizza Connoisseur,
Wow.
Josh Kloke. Josh, first question, hitting
the
you
rest
with
of
the
the
heavy
Athletic.
one.
No kidding.
That's
What did
right.
they do to you?
Shout out to my boy Saad Youssef with the Dallas Stars, but no, it's all Kloke. Josh, we got to start with the most important question because I saw it on my timeline today. I only want to hear from you. Pineapple on pizza, yes or no?
Anybody who says pineapple shouldn't be on pizza will never get an invite to my house. One of the best pizza restaurants in Hamilton. Pineapple absolutely deserves to be on pizza. What people don't understand about pineapple is that you have to pair it with something a little spicy. So you put pepperoni, jalapeno, and pineapple together. Elite combination. I've already got it ready for Friday.
This is why we have Kloke on for his soccer.
Is this the time of year where everyone gets so bored? You talk about something as stupid as pineapple on pizza. Is today the day? Because if so, I'm going back to sleep. See you later. Bye, everyone.
It came up on my timeline. Kloke was going to be on, so I figured we had to get the
timeline sucks. Oh man.
Well, I mean, I still do follow you, Wheels, so that says something about my taste. Let's get to the football
Your
talks.
problem, not mine.
Lots to get to today. Of course, FC Edmonton yesterday announcing they got a new president. That's Jeff Harrop. We'll get the gentleman to weigh in on that. We'll find out which Winter Olympic sport the guys think that they could compete in and not humiliate themselves. But we'll start with the Canadian men's national team and Oliver Platt's article on OneSoccer.ca yesterday outlining all the ways Canada can book their ticket to Qatar in their very next match. So, Ollie, it's a simple question. Now that you know the scenarios, is Canada in?
Yeah, of course they're in, and I think they'll do it in Costa Rica as well. You look at the scenarios. If they win, then it doesn't matter what anyone else does. They've qualified, and even if they draw, they only need one of Panama or the United States against Honduras and Mexico, respectively, not to win for a draw to be enough. So it looks pretty good for it to happen in Costa Rica. Even a loss, they still have a chance, although it's a bit of a longer shot. Need more, a couple of results to go their way. But yeah, it looks good. It's a matter of time, right? It's going to happen at some point, but I do think it will happen in Costa Rica.
Thinks it'll happen in Costa Rica. That's the optimism. That's the confidence we love to hear. But
I've already called out. Let's reissue my challenge to the country. That should be an absolute party day in Canada. Keep on spreading the word. Let's make this happen. March 24th.
And don't forget that Wheels has already promised an absolute festival at his place. So we're all banking on him getting there on the 24th.
I'll bring the pizza wheels, tons of pineapple, so don't you worry about it.
All the pineapple you want, buddy.
It just keeps getting better. All right. In a world, Gareth, where the Canadian men's national team do not qualify in their first attempt of the 3-match window, they could do it against Jamaica. Where will they play? We'll discuss that a little bit later. But in that situation, and I guess just in general, your boys, Jamaica, do you think they field their strongest 11 Wheels? Or do you think at this point some of the Jamaicans just decide to stay with their club teams?
They're done. It's time to
what a moment.
I know. Unlike you and Halifax Wanderers, Ollie, I'm willing to throw in the towel when it's this apparent. The numbers say it. Like, Jamaica's done. Shamar Nicholson made a move to Russia. He didn't even play in the last window for Jamaica. So all those big, like, Mikel Antonio is not coming. His manager, for crying out loud, puts a cat kicker on the field. Like, and there's no chance he's letting Mikel Antonio make this trip to CONCACAF for this upcoming window. Same thing with Ethan Pinnock of Brentford. They have big games ahead as they try to stay out of a relegation battle. It's just time for them to turn their focus to younger players, domestic players. There might be an outlier here or there. Bobby Reed's obviously trying to gain promotion with Fulham. So I think that all of these players will not make the trip over. So this is why it was so important for Canada to pick up the points early to avoid scenarios like this that might benefit other countries. And the fact that they put themselves in a scenario where really they're too big to lose, this is the perfect scenario for them, and let everyone else deal with the consequences of not picking up your points early.
It also, to me, raises the question of, let's say Canada do get that win in Costa Rica, which I hope they will. The Athletic will be there just for you, Jenkins. If they do qualify in that first game, and that second game is kind of a homecoming. What kind of 11 do you put out? Do you put out your best 11 to give a crowd the chance to see, David Larin, or again, if Jamaica is bringing maybe a subpar 11? Do you do that as well? Do you give some other guys a look? That's just a question I've been kind of thinking about ahead of that second game.
Well, and the interesting thing about that as well is, like as Gareth just alluded to, in terms of teams that have maybe done changing their 11 or not having all their players, like Canada going to Panama for their last game, that could be a massive game for Panama, right?
Yeah.
That could have implications for Costa Rica, maybe even for Mexico or USA if things go wrong for them in the next window. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see how they approach that.
I'm sure that there will be other players who will be talked about, maybe potentially coming into camp in the March window. We'll see if there will be any new faces. But Josh, to answer your question, I think it'll be just such a party that it won't be like that would be enough for the fans, right? But what I think that Herdman would do is potentially give some of those players who haven't played a lot of minutes over the course of World Cup qualifying. And a lot of players have played bigger roles, but I'm talking about the Derek Corneliuses, the Samuel Pietts, players that have been in this from the start, make sure that they're able to play some time in those final games and, play their part, which they already have, but play, a little bit more over the course of this, defining qualifying period.
Well, a name that we haven't touched on yet, which is almost remarkable considering where we were not too long ago. And as much as we've enjoyed the Twitch streams, we'd love to see Almonzo Davies back wearing number 19 for Canada, Josh. Are you expecting to have him available for the next window based on everything you've seen from Bayern and the rumors and the word around Davies right now?
Yeah, I'm a little less optimistic than I was a few weeks ago, that's for sure. Talking to some people at Bayern, I think this is something that they're really trying to be very cautious about. Last week, Julian Nagelsmann said that, there's still no timeline for his return. And yes, those March qualifying games are still about 6 weeks away, but I just sense some hesitation in his voice. And, that original 4-week window that he was looking at, that would come up at the end of this week. But again, if your coach is saying there's no timeline, that's a bit iffy to me. The other thing that kind of gives me a bit of pause is right after that March window, Bayern will presumably play, the quarterfinals in the Champions League. Those are the kind of games where things get very, very real, and you're going to want, your best 11 available. And Almonzo Davies still unquestionably is in that best 11. Would Bayern prevent Almonzo Davies from going to that final window where, Canada could clinch their first World Cup berth since 1986? That's where things get really tricky for me, but it doesn't sound as promising as it did a few weeks ago, which is disappointing for the player first and foremost, right?
100%. Well, Gareth, that's obviously the number one question on a lot of supporters' minds right now. The second biggest question, I would certainly imagine, is where's that game going to be played? Is it Toronto? Is it St. John's? Is it on the West Coast in Vancouver? I know something we love to joke about is what's going on in Herdman's ear, and I'm convinced that he's often just you. But have you overheard any rumblings on where this game's going to be played?
No, I haven't, but I heard more talk about how this would work itself out from the start of the campaign, but I've had no new information. I'd be shocked if it wasn't in Toronto. This is like their home. They're starting to build something at BMO Field. There's a good feel about it. Travel is obviously more simplistic, especially what John Herdman said ahead of the game in Hamilton. He's looking out for his players' welfare, and it's more likely that players like Davies and others can make that trip over if they've qualified by the end of that game in Toronto. Easy flight from Toronto back to Europe, and then you can bring in some other players to play that final match to be played in Panama. So I'd expect Toronto. I know that there will be some that are pushing for Vancouver, especially because, I heard this months ago that Vancouver had come back into the World Cup host city mix for 2022, back for 2026, that is, back from the dead. They're back in the mix. There's a big political play there, and that was one of the reasons why there was a lot of people pushing to have the January game played in Vancouver as well. But this is all about the team right now, what's best for the players, and that seems to be playing the game in Toronto.
Let's switch gears a little bit to Toronto FC, and what a wild offseason it has been. For those in the know, and that's not to sort of sound exclusive, like only a few people could see this coming, could read the tea leaves, but for those who really follow the team, the supporters, the pundits, etc., they knew this rebuild was coming. We knew that at some point the team was going to look drastically different in so many ways. Of course, you get the new coach, you get Ali Curtis out, to the delight of many supporters on Twitter. It's been nice to see people's faces again and not just the Curtis out meme that was there for a while. Sebastian Giovinco is coming back. Now he's in Italy. Maybe he comes back to join Lorenzo Insigne. These are the discussions we've been having throughout the offseason. But it's not over yet, because as much as there's been rumors that Jozy Altidore is going to go to the New England Revolution and he's done with Toronto FC, we haven't seen pen to paper on anything. So before we get into a little bit of one of our favorite games, likely or unlikely, Josh, I just want to get you to weigh in on your thoughts on what's been this rebuild and what you think about the moves that have been made, any weaknesses, where are the strengths, what does Toronto FC 2022 look like to you?
Well, I would say still TBD in terms of what they're going to look like. I mean, I think we all got to look at that preseason roster, and it was very, very thin. I think as much as, Lorenzo Insigne is the big name that's been attached to this rebuild, for me, there's no more important person in this rebuild right now than Bob Bradley, because if you look at this squad, like I said, it's still very thin. We expect them to add more, and we expect them to add more stars. So 2 points there. It's going to be on Bob Bradley to get the most out of some young players and some players that are still kind of unproven, and get the most out of this team early on in the season where they will probably lack a bit of depth. And then once that injection of stars does happen, we presume kind of in that summer window, it's going to be on Bob Bradley to manage some of the egos that are sure to come into the squad. So again, I think Bob Bradley, even though Lorenzo Insigne was the big name signing, it got a lot of people on board, this rebuild will succeed or it will fail because of Bob Bradley.
Yeah, Bob has already had, from what I've been told, just brought an enormous influence on this team already, just in terms of reinstilling discipline, authority, direction into this team. It's felt that at times last year was a little bit of a rudderless operation. The problem is, Josh, and I've kind of documented this for months now, team doesn't have much cap space. I know they picked up more GAM money today, whatever. There's only so much that they can do. I hate GAM and TAM. It's so ridiculous. But there's only so much they can do in like one window. Like, this is going to take multiple windows to build this out and create that cap flexibility. Osorio's contract increased by TFC picking up the option. Akinola's contract isn't cheap. You have two goalkeepers on decent money. You have two center backs on decent money. Like, there isn't a whole lot of financial flexibility to go out and just do whatever you want. So I think the biggest part of the process has been shedding players and shedding salary. And I know all fans might not understand why this player or that player might go. Look, if you're not committed to the team, if there's problems off the field, if there's things that have transpired that haven't sat well over the last 12 to 18 months in the way that people approach things, guess what? You're going to find yourself on the outside looking in. This is time to hit that reset button. I was told it was going to be blown up. I was told back in October that this whole TFC team, just wait, is going to go completely nuclear. And that's exactly what we're seeing right now. But Josh, you hit the nail on the head here. Some opportunity for young Canadian players, especially, to go out and carve themselves roles in this team. Last game, and you'll see it if there's ever a live stream, Jaquil Marshall-Ruddy, right back, Jacob Schaffelberg, left back. Those aren't two players known for their defensive prowess. I believe that Alejandro Pozuelo is going to play in the number 8 role for this team. Is he able to stay positionally disciplined enough to fit in this Bob Bradley system? We know how that, like, the speculation online about how Bob Bradley plays. Haven't you seen Bob Bradley and his teams and the way they play in recent years? They want to get the wide players in behind the back line. They want to bring their fullbacks forward. This is how they want to play. And so we'll see who fits and we'll see who doesn't, but certainly there's some real good opportunity for some young Canadian players.
Very quickly, Jaquil Marshall-Ruddy should be a starter in this team. I'm that's the hill I'm going to die on. In 2022 TFC, he should be a starter on this team. If TFC want to move him and make some profit there, if he wants to force himself into the national team conversation, I really think the talent is there and he could be, the next Almonzo Davies coming from Canada.
All right, we got to push this conversation forward as much as I know this one could go on for hours. That's the kind of off-season it's been. Also, just because I miss hearing the sound of Oliver Platt's voice. Never thought I was going to say that. Let's get into likely or unlikely. Ollie, I'll give the first question to you. Do you think Toronto FC is making a mistake, if the reports are true, in not giving Jozy Altidore one last shot? Likely or unlikely?
Unlikely, because firstly, I think look, I like Jozy, and I think he's had a hard time of it for various reasons over the past 2 or 3 years, but they have given him a shot, right? 2 or 3 times, and it just hasn't worked out because of injuries, because of the coaching situation. It's not been the right fit. And I think it's time to move on. I don't think you can really accuse Toronto FC of not giving Jozy Altidore enough shots. The other side of it is just a practical situation, right? Like they don't have room for him on the roster anymore as a designated player. So they have to move him on. If they want to bring in Insigne, if they want to keep Pozuelo, and obviously they've ended up essentially trading Soteldo for another DP, the cap math just doesn't work out to keep Jozy. So no, at this point, like I think there's a chance that Jozy goes somewhere else and has a good season and bounces back and maybe benefits from that change of scenery and people will come around and say, well, we're TFC too soon or too quick to get rid of him. I don't think if you've been watching this team for the past 2 or 3 years, you can really possibly say that at this point. It's time to break that relationship off and move on. Hopefully he can resuscitate his career, but it's just not happening in Toronto anymore.
Josh, anything to argue with there?
No, not at all. I mean, I do think going back to Jozy Altidore re-upping with the team, I think that was one of the errors in this team, because I think that probably delayed the rebuild a little bit. I think if you talk to people kind of behind the scenes, there was a lot of concern over Jozy Altidore's injury history, even before re-upping on that contract. And if you look at it, Javinko leaves. I think Bill Manning's hand was forced a little. I think there was a lot of concern from supporters. And that one always bothered me because it did feel like, management was weighing in the concern of those supporters a little too much. He's a club legend. There's no doubt about that. But, sometimes you just have to kind of gut things and make sure that the big names that you do bring in have kind of full control of the dressing room. And I think they're going to bring in some very big voices. There's no concern with me, about kind of allowing Jozy Altidore to move on.
Unlikely. 6 goals in 30 games in the last 2 seasons, less than 1,500 minutes. Need to be fit, need to be able to play, especially when you're a DP in this league.
It seems a little bit harsh, but I think it's fair to say Jozy's season peaked when he threw the ball on the pitch from the stands, and then it was all a little bit downhill from there. Right back to Wheels for the next likely or unlikely. Carlos Salcedo will have a bigger impact this season than Jefferson Soteldo did for the Reds. Wheels.
Well, I'm going to say likely because that has to be the case. Because Soteldo, for as much talent he brought to the field last year, was a nightmare off it, and the team didn't win with him on the field. And the biggest problem in the Toronto FC's team last year was keeping the ball out of the back of the net. He's a very good player. He's joining a back line that needs some serious improvement. The hope is that he can also make Chris Mavinga a more reliable player as well. What about the fullbacks? What about the team shape? If this team has any aspirations for going on to do anything special this year, then Salcedo is going to have to be more impactful.
I don't love the idea of spending DP money on a defender, and I don't think I'm alone in that regard. However, getting free of Soteldo should be seen, even though perhaps that signing, there was a lot of red flags at the beginning. Getting free of the player, considering all the kind of harm that was brought off the pitch, as you alluded to, Wheels, that's a big win for this team, for this management group. So, I likely as well.
Yeah, I think some fans kind of watched Soteldo and thought, well, this guy doesn't look that bad. Maybe he's not been as impactful as we hoped for a DP, but he's been one of the better players on the team. And yet I have to reiterate that it's not about that. And I think if you want to get an idea of what the problem was with Soteldo, you just need to read what Michael Bradley had to say about it this week, where sometimes, with a player, the talent is there, but other things aren't. And I think it was a fairly poorly kept secret, particularly while the team was in Florida in the early part of the season, that Soteldo was not a good fit and not setting a great example as a designated player in terms of his professionalism and conduct off the pitch. So that's what this was about. And I think, offloading him was never going to be that easy. And so finding a player like Salcedo is not a bad way to go about it.
Having listened to a lot of Michael Bradley press conferences, that's about as damning a quote as we've ever heard from him. He's a player that can say a lot by saying very little. And I think you're right, Ollie. This was a really poorly kept secret. Culture is kind of a strange word to keep kind of bandying about. But I think if you're looking to kind of improve team culture, which was a big, big step for this team, getting out of Soteldo is a big one.
Yeah, good point.
Few more likely or unlikelies to get to. Got to speed it up a little bit, especially because I can't wait for Gareth Wheeler to tell me why he would be good at ski jumping. But the goals have to come, and they have to come before Lorenzo Insigne arrives. Likely or unlikely, Ollie, that Ayo Akinola scores more than 14 goals this season?
That's a tough one. I'm going to say unlikely because, obviously he's got to get healthy first, and 14 is a good number. But I really think Akinola is a really good player. And I think that if they're going to give him that job of being the starting number 9, which I think the Jimenez signing suggests that they're going to give him every opportunity, because Jimenez kind of strikes me as a bit more of like a 1B type center forward than an outright, starter. I think that's the right decision to give him that runway. We've seen what this kid can do when he is fully healthy and he has a decent team around him like he did in 2020. And I think the potential is there to score a lot of goals. I also just don't think that he would necessarily have agreed to come back if he wasn't given some assurances about the kind of minutes that he's going to get, given that he probably fairly easily could have gone to Europe. And I'm sure his salary reflects that as well. So I think they should give him an opportunity. It makes sense with a DP situation as well. They can't bring in a DP striker. And I think he could run with it. 14 is maybe a bit ambitious coming off an injury, but we'll see.
I had a chance to speak to Akinola a few weeks ago, and he told me that he doesn't even expect to start, getting into full team training until mid-March. So then you're looking at kind of 4 games off the schedule. I suspect that he will score more than 14 goals in 2023, unquestionably. But there were only 10 players in MLS that scored more than 14 goals last season. So 14 feels a bit unlikely. But again, the ceiling is very, very high for this player.
Yeah, it's unlikely. Only 10 players in MLS scored 10 goals or 14 goals or more last season. And Akinola, I'm not expecting him to be, have the training wheels taken off till the summertime. Like, you can't risk a young player coming back from that serious of an injury, especially when he's not ready to go from the start. They're going to have to be very careful with him. That's why that Jimenez signing is so important for this team. So unlikely.
All right, talking a little bit more about the departures, likely or unlikely. Hot Wheels. Toronto FC is going to miss Richard
Thank you.
Lorraine
About time.
Than any other off-season departure.
I was waiting for the Hot Wheels, and it took, 22 minutes till the Hot Wheels came out? More than any other player. Oh, man. Let's go likely on this one. Because I think it's not only the way that he plays, the way that he approaches the game as well. Like, the fact that he was a local player, represented the hard work, brought that edge to this team. Someone else is going to have to bring that. It's fine being a talented player, but he's more of an accomplished, complete player right now who brings that character, who brought that persona. So someone else is going to have to pick up where he left off. I'll give a consolation prize to Marky Delgado. We'll see how that midfield stays together. They're going to really miss his legs and work rate in the middle of the park, but Larea is my guy. I'll go with Larea.
Josh?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Ollie.
I was going to say you could make a case for either one of them, but I just think players like Larea are a bit more difficult to find. John Herdman, I think, has said this about him. He's one of those players who's like a maverick, right? He's dynamic. He's capable of changing the pace of the game, opening a defense up with a moment of quality. And those guys are difficult to find. So obviously Insigne is going to be one of those in the summer. And we'll see which one of these young players can really take the opportunity that I think they're going to get in the early part of the season and run with it. Marshall Rutty is obviously one of them. DeAndre Kerr, I've had a lot of really good things about. He could be an exciting one to watch. And there's a few others in there as well, Nelson, Schaffelberg, and so on. So TFC are going to need players like that, capable of opening games up, and they're not easy to find.
Yeah, this TFC team is going to be a strange one because there's so many new players. You wonder about team chemistry. You wonder how long that's going to take to gel. I love a player like Larea because he just drags you into the fight, right? And he's the kind of player that, when things get testy, he's the guy that sticks up for his teammates on the pitch. And you want that kind of player to build that team unity. I'm a massive fan of Larea, and I'm a massive fan of his story too. But I do think it was good of TFC to kind of let the player go, try his hand in Europe. That's what he wanted. He made that very, very clear. So even though he could have been a very valuable piece to this team, it is important that management kind of respects the player's wishes in this regard.
Yeah.
Okay, we've laid the groundwork, so I just need a quick likely or unlikely. Are Toronto FC a playoff team? Let's start with Josh.
Likely, but just barely.
Wheels?
I'm going to go with unlikely. Like, they got to jump over a lot of teams. We'll see what it looks like. There's a lot to prove. Too much unknown for me right now, so unlikely.
Ollie?
Me? I'm going to say likely because I have a lot of faith in Bob Bradley. I think he's a really good coach. I think he's one of a small number of coaches. Well, not a small number. It's growing, but he's one of the coaches in North America who I think really pushes the boat and tries to take risks and is creative in the way he wants his teams to play. And I think TFC fans should be very excited about that.
I think Lorenzo Insigne wins you 3 games alone at the end.
Well, exactly.
I do.
Stay in touch until the summer, right?
Yeah,
and you can go.
Yeah, I think those.
Can they do that? The start of the season is going to be exceptionally difficult for this team.
We'll see.
You guys know I'm a big CPL guy. I'm just hoping for the best for Caden Chung. Would love to see him and Lucas McNaughton both end up as Reds this year. And speaking of the Canadian Premier League, let's talk a little bit about that now. Look, there are so many questions about FC Edmonton this season. We know the struggles they're going through with the change of ownership. Finally announced a couple of players today in Darlington Murasarawa and T-Boy Fayaya. But yesterday, a big move when they announced that Jeff Harrop, Edmontonian himself with 20 years of business experience across all sectors, including with the Edmonton Oilers in OEG. Do we think this is a step in the right direction, bringing Jeff in, Ollie?
Yeah, of course it is. I think the club has kind of been the barest of bare bones for the past few months. Obviously, the league has taken over the kind of running of it. And I think fans have just been desperate to hear something, right? Desperate to hear that there's some direction. So this is a good start. It's a big, big job. I think this is going to be a really difficult season for FC Edmonton. I think they are going to be 8th place in everyone's power rankings because of the way this roster is going to Some of the...
Don't speak for me.
We'll see. We'll see on the Wheels way too early power rankings. I just from some of the things I've heard, right? Like I think the consequences of the fact that the team doesn't have an owner right now are going to be quite significant in terms of the kind of roster they can put together. So it's going to be a tough one, but in those situations, you can also find opportunity if you look for it. There's going to be an opportunity to give a lot of young players opportunities to start to look ahead 2 or 3 years down the line and maybe try and replicate something like Pacific have done over 3 seasons. So I think there's optimism about the future there, but it's going to be a difficult short term.
I love the idea of bringing in people from other organizations, other sports to kind of help improve an organization. But I worry about the Edmonton Oilers track record. Not exactly an illustrious track record of success.
Had to go there, Kloke.
Of course I did. Of course I did. It worries me. That's all I'll say.
I got nothing to add. I wouldn't know him from the guy down the street, so I have nothing to add. 0 things to add on this.
I thought I was safe taking a sip of coffee as Ollie was going to give me a good, responsible answer with nothing too jarring, and then Wheels pops up, and I almost had a spit take on OneSoccer today, which would not have been good for anybody.
That would be awesome. It would be great for everyone.
It would have been bad for me, but good for everyone else, I imagine. Okay, it's the moment I've personally been waiting for all show. The question, in the spirit of the Olympic Games, and of course our friend Annie Petrillo, who somehow is hosting OneSoccer today, and an amazing show, by the way, with Amy Walsh, Kaylin Kyle, and Laura Armstrong yesterday. Check that out as well on onesoccer.ca if you haven't already seen it. But in the spirit of Andy and the Olympics, let's start with this one, I suppose. Gareth, what winter sport could you participate in without completely embarrassing yourself?
First off, let me get this off my chest. The Winter Olympics stinks compared to the Summer Olympics. All of these sports, not enough sports. All the good sports are in the Summer Olympics. It's time to diversify. Like, why is it indoor soccer in the Winter Olympics? Come on, we need to think outside the box here, IOC.
What? Indoor soccer?
There's sports like that. Why is boxing or basketball in the summer? Like,
okay, Cold
indoors.
Wheels, move along.
No, I can only win one sport in the Winter Olympics, that is the 4-man bobsled, because allow me to be one of those guys that push it and run up in and let everyone else do hard work. So I can definitely piggyback off someone else's athletic acumen and go on and win a medal.
Josh, put the wheels back on this show.
Yeah, okay. I have a 3-year-old at home who is just a walking mess and just leaves filth everywhere he goes. And I feel like I spend far too many hours following him with a broom. So, I think I do okay at curling because I feel like I'm just sweeping up after a toddler all day, every day.
So Josh's 2 stones he has to throw.
Absolute
dumpster
I crush
fire,
you in curling. My team won. My team won on Monday. Dominant.
Well, I've got the toddler.
And yet Wheels
go,
hates on the Winter Olympics despite being great at curling. Oliver Platt, what would you do without humiliating yourself?
Third string goalie for Team Canada hockey. Right? Just sit on the bench, take some notes, count face-offs. I think that's what they do sometimes.
Yeah.
That would suit me.
I apologize for this visual, but another good shout for Wheels would have been the 2-man luge where he's just the weight on top and someone else can steer for him.
I'm a fat ass now. That won't work. Maybe old Wheels, not new Wheels.
I'm going to give myself the shout of skeleton because I've always wanted to try it. I love the idea of going head first, and I'm obsessed with it. What do you mean? What am I talking about?
Skeleton, like the most dangerous sport in the Winter Olympics you've chosen there.
Absolutely. I don't even want to defend this any further.
Wheels down on that one.
Challenge accepted. Somebody in Calgary's got to hook me up with the skeleton track. Okay, on the topic of skeleton, Josh, which sport would you die attempting?
Yeah, I mean, all of them. No, all of them. I know how hard Olympic athletes train, and I know that I would have to give up, pineapple pizza for the rest of my life, and my body would shut down. My body would just physically shut down if I had to stop eating pizza. So all of them, I would die in every single event, just in the training for them.
Gareth?
None. Can't break this. Can't break
Oliver,
this,
please,
bro.
for the love of God. 0 for 2.
Do them all,
Gareth.
just not very good.
Oliver, is it ski jumping? Is it aerials where you gotta flip in the air on only a pair of skis? Where would you go?
Which one would I die in?
Yes.
Oh, well, yeah, it's most of them, right? Like I was going to say, it would be easier to pick the ones I wouldn't die in, which would be like curling, maybe. Should be able to avoid death there. Skiing, like
all of these sports, like ski jumping, the aerials, there's so few people that actually do these things. You start off easy and work your way back up. It's like, who knows, 20 ranked ski jumper in the world. Oh, there's only 100 people that do it? Okay, like, I'm awesome. These sports are just made up. The Winter Olympics is full of sports that are simply made up. Not even real.
You think you could ski jump without serious injury? You think?
I would start slow. Yeah, no problem. Done. I'd
start slow on the massive hill. And on that note, ladies and gentlemen, this is where we will say goodbye
Wheels up!
for OneSoccer today. Wheels up, skis down. Thank you all for spending a bit of time with us today. We look forward to seeing you again, and of course, our roundtable discussion on Friday. Get your questions in on onesoccer.ca once we start asking for them, which will be very, very soon. Josh Kloke, we appreciate you. Where can we find your stuff?
You can find me at The Athletic, which I believe you've heard of.
Yes, I have.
Only reason to subscribe.
Yes, I have. All right, Kloke, Wheels, Ollie. Thank you, boys. Appreciate it. We'll talk to you guys real soon again on the OneSoccer Today special.